This is my third video on the ongoing global trade war. In the past two videos, we explored why countries fight trade wars, what it really takes to win one, and broke down Donald Trump's actions in the current conflict, making some bold predictions about how he might lose and still somehow win. Now, we're turning to the other side of the story, to China, and how it has prepared for this latest round of economic confrontation. Let's start with a quick recap of Trade War 1.0. In July 2018, the first shots were fired when President Trump suddenly slapped 25% tariffs on $34 billion worth of Chinese imports, including automobiles, hard drives, and aircraft components. China responded right away, matching those tariffs with 25% duties on an equal amount of American goods, targeting soybeans, cars, and seafood. What followed was a tit-for-tat escalation. The U.S. eventually placed tariffs on over $550 billion worth of Chinese products, and China retaliated against around $185 billion in American exports. The result? Global supply chains were thrown into chaos. Market confidence took a hit, and economic uncertainty spread around the world. By January 2020, after nearly 2 years of economic sparring, the two sides signed the Phase 1 trade deal. Under the agreement, China pledged to increase its purchases of U.S. goods and services by $200 billion over 2017 levels. It also agreed to improve protections for intellectual property, limit forced tech transfers, and open its financial markets further to American firms. In exchange, the U.S. rolled back a small portion of its tariffs. On the surface, it looked like a win for Washington. But the deal didn't touch deeper structural issues, like China's state subsidies and industrial policy. It was supposed to lead to a broader Phase 2 agreement, which never materialized. And even under the Phase 1 terms, China bought less than 60% of what it had promised. Looking back, it's clear Trade War 1.0 caught China off guard. At the time, the U.S. made up about 20% of China's exports, and much of that was low-tech goods, things like clothing, electronics, and household products that could easily be replaced. When the tariffs hit, there was real confusion inside China, both among government leaders and the public. That led to a cautious and defensive response, which helped get the Phase 1 deal signed. However, it made Beijing look weak and was a painful lesson that China would not forget. Beijing came to understand that this wasn't a one-time dispute. It was the beginning of a long-term struggle. So, it began making broad, strategic shifts to prepare for the next round. It saw the dangers of relying too much on U.S. markets and technology. It saw how fragile its export-driven supply chains had become. And it realized it didn't yet have the tools to push back effectively. Most importantly, it learned that showing weakness only invited more demands. One of its first moves was to diversify trade. In 2018, the U.S. accounted for 1/5 of China's exports. Today, that has dropped to 15%. At the same time, China strengthened its ties with Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America countries. It also joined the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, the largest trade bloc in the world. Chinese manufacturers also began shifting operations to countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, and Mexico. This helped them sidestep tariffs and take advantage of lower production costs. In fact, since 2018, more than 4,000 Chinese firms have opened factories in Vietnam alone. Domestically, China focused on growing internal demand. It introduced stimulus programs, offered tax breaks, and promoted spending on local brands. The dual circulation strategy, rolled out soon after the trade war began, was designed to make China's economy less dependent on exports. In the tech sector, China ramped up investment. It now accounts for more than 25% of global R&D spending, and has pledged over $1 trillion toward next-generation industries like semiconductors, AI, green energy, and quantum computing. It also tightened its grip on rare earth minerals, the raw materials used in everything from smartphones to electric vehicles. China now mines 70% of the world's rare earths and processes over 90% of them, giving it some serious leverage. China also built out a legal and regulatory arsenal. It launched the Unreliable Entities List, passed the Export Control Law, and introduced the Anti-Foreign Sanctions Law, all designed to support local firms and punish foreign companies seen as acting against Chinese interests. It also stepped up trade investigations and anti-dumping actions targeting sensitive U.S. sectors. Financially, China stockpiled critical commodities like soybeans, crude oil, and lithium. It pushed for greater use of the yuan in global trade and invested heavily in strategic industries, while keeping spending tight and building up a massive financial buffer. Which brings us to today. The question now is, has all that preparation worked? One thing is clear, China is much better prepared than it was in 2018. When Donald Trump announced a 34% tariff hike on April 2nd, China responded immediately. The tit-for-tat continued until U.S. tariffs hit 145% and China's reached 125%. Alongside that, Beijing rolled out targeted blows, restricting exports of rare earth minerals and rejecting deliveries of Boeing jets. This time, there was no panic, no hesitation. China's response was swift, measured, and clearly planned in advance. That doesn't mean the country is unscathed. China's exports to the U.S. dropped by 21% in April 2025. But compared to 2018, the damage was far more contained. Years of trade diversification, stronger domestic demand, and supply chain flexibility helped absorb the shock. China also acted quickly at home, cutting interest rates, boosting industrial investment, and supporting vulnerable sectors to keep the economy steady. So yes, this trade war has hurt China, but the pain was much better managed. And this time, Beijing landed several hard punches of its own. Here's the big irony. The United States may have already missed its best chance to economically contain China when it signed the Phase 1 deal in 2020 and gave China the breathing room it needed. Instead of pressing its advantage, Washington backed off. And China used those 5 years to get ready. Now in 2025, the game is far from over, but the landscape has changed. This time, China isn't just reacting. It's fighting back, hard.